was typically a journalist or sometimes just a novelist, a writer who would expose corruption of the day, whether it's political corruption or social corruption, or corruption within the industry like the jungle. So I just want to come up with a few little bullet point ideas for what you answered on number one. So the first one was the Standard Oil, the exposing the Standard Oil Company. And that was the big oil company that was led by John D. Rockefeller, and we saw that a couple sections ago. And this little, this section here, really, she wrote a whole book called The History of the Standard Oil Company, Ida Tarbell. And what was her major point in this little excerpt? What did you get from this, Holly?
Like, he was monopolizing and like threatening the smaller oil companies to sell to him. And if like they didn't, he would still take their company.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. And how was it that Rockefeller's company became so powerful? What was their business tactic? Marnie?
They would lower the prices really like than any other business around.
Yeah.
And then once all the other businesses went out of business, then they would like jack the prices up.
Yeah, and people wouldn't have any other choice but to pay the high prices because they're the only place where you could buy oil from now. So this was a very common scheme, basically, with these big businesses. So yeah, he had a monopoly over all the other oil companies from, we'll just put like due to low prices, then extremely high, once everybody else was bought out. And the other companies that that Ida is talking about in this passage, they didn't want to sell out their companies, but they were forced to. Otherwise, I mean, they would have gone bankrupt anyway. So Rockefeller made a deal with them and said, well, I'll buy your company for such and such amount of money. And it, of course, it wasn't the money that the company was worth, but at least they got some. Some was better than nothing. So.
I think it's kind of ironic that the Rockefeller Center was named after him, because it's like,
Well,
why
he
are we
did,
praising him?
he did do a lot of good as well, kind of to cover up for the, you know, for all of his misgivings here, but, so yeah, he founded a lot of neat buildings and schools and libraries and all kinds of things, but, you know, kind of like at what cost back then. Who's played Monopoly before? Have I already asked this? Okay, do you think that it's funny? I do, in reading like these last few chapters, like you start to recognize the historical like influence of all the different names in Monopoly and like the types of, you know, the buying out the railroad companies and like, I can't remember if Rockefeller is in there or not, but is there an oil company? I feel like, yeah, okay. Is Steel maybe?
I haven't played it.
No, I don't think
I haven't played it in a long time
There's
either, but-
electricity and water.
Yes, that's right, okay. So a lot of terms having to do with industry, that kind of thing. Okay, good. Anything else about the Standard Oil passage? Any questions or comments, Maddie?
I think, if I read it correctly, I think Rockefeller worked with the railroad, and the railroad raised their prices so high that there was no room for storage
Yes.
for the smaller companies.
Yes, oh yes, okay, so this was another thing, another, I guess, method of getting to the top. They would collaborate with other large corporations, the railroads in this instance. So they were able to work as a team to overtake, and actually that's what a trust is. That's what a trust does, basically. It's when two large companies or more sometimes merge together, really for their own benefit. Now, trusts exist today, and of course they're regulated by the government, so it's a little bit different. Banks have trusts and things like that, but that's a little bit different. So, yeah, good, excellent. I thought it was funny that this was written by a woman too. So, because people were already a little bit suspicious of muckrakers, even though I think people appreciated hearing the truth about things. But again, sometimes they would over-sensationalize what they were writing, and you weren't really sure if it was factual or not, or if it was, exaggerated, just like our tabloid magazines and things like that. So, if someone's carrying an alien baby. So sometimes they would way over-exaggerate things having to do with, the exploitation of these companies. And but, in this case, I think this is probably pretty accurate to what actually happened. So, okay. And what did it say? Let's see. Did it say anything about where Ida came from now? Okay. What about in The Shame of the Cities? They talk about the corrupt voting process. And what do they say about it? What was going on? Yeah, Olivia?
They had these guys named like repeaters.
Yeah.
And they passed out papers and they just kept voting again and again to like corrupt the
Yeah,
voter.
yeah. And who was overseeing this and making sure that they went back to vote again, Paige? The police. Yeah, yeah. So the guys that are supposed to be like making sure things are going cleanly are it's going the opposite way. Yeah, so the repeaters, literally, that's what they were doing. They would repeat voters several times over and over. And in the passage, it says that the police officers were like demonstrating how to do it, like walking around in the circle and, oh gosh. Yeah, so obviously not a clean system of voting going on. Okay, how do we ensure that this doesn't happen today? How is voting set up? Has anybody ever gone with their parents to vote? Do you remember what it looked like on the inside? Because nobody in here is old enough to vote yet. Are you? Are you at 18, Olivia? Not yet. Okay. So when you walk into the precinct to vote, which is your location for, it depends on like where you live in the city. What did it look like? Do you remember, Holly, you were nodding?
I think it was like, almost like a folder, and it was set up where there was like 2 buttons, and you could like press each one, and then you walk out, and no one would know what you did.
Yeah, you have your own little, it always reminds me of the Wizard of Oz when I go in there, because you have your own little station with like your own personal curtain, so no one can really see, it's like a cubicle of curtains. No one can see what you're doing. You don't have to declare like which party you belong to, or you don't have to tell anyone who you're voting for. And a lot of people don't like to share that information. Some people are sensitive if you ask, who did you vote for? It's none of your business, So that's the nice thing. You can share it if you want to. You don't have to. And it's not like this open voting where everyone is aware of who you voted for. That obviously causes lots of problems. So, and then of course everything now is digital, so there's really no physical way that someone could vote twice. It's once it's in the system, the computer recognizes it, your name goes along with it, and so you can't do it again. So it's somewhat of a foolproof system, not totally, but okay, good. Anything else about this section with the voting? Questions? No? Okay. So then moving on to the jungle, what was one of the main ideas or points of Upton Sinclair's novel, The Jungle? Yeah, Holly?
It talked about how they still used meat that was like molded or sour, and they would inject it with chemicals and give it to the markets, and they would sell it, and people would eat it, and it's kind of gross.
Yeah, so we're, the main point of writing this was to letting the public know that they were eating or buying perhaps not so fresh meat. We'll put adulterated meat products. When something is something is adulterated, like if we talk about like adulterated meat or adulterated grain or something, it just means that like it's not a pure product. There's been other things that have gone into it without the consumer knowing about it sometimes. So again, we have all these regulations now where companies are allowed to do this, at least in theory. And but yeah, pretty gross stuff that they're describing in here. And even just from like the cover of the book, you can sort of tell what the novel is about here. Why do you think it's called The Jungle? Maddie?
Well, there's like, I don't know, like, I always think of like lions and tigers and stuff, well,
Yeah.
not lions, but like, yeah.
Yeah.
In the jungle, and there's like the food chain and everything like that,
Right.
so it just kind of seems like they're on top and like they don't know, I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. It's literally about the food chain, and then also metaphorically as well, right? With the consumer and the big businesses and sort of using them as prey, that kind of thing. Yeah, what else, Marnie?
I just kind of interpret it as like we're supposed to kind of become like civilized, and you know they kind of have like the term like don't act like an animal. Yet
Yes.
It feels like it's occurring like within the city walls and stuff,
Right.
and it's just not controlled, and it's kind of like
Right.
they really were. It was really kind of corrupt in its own way and uncivilized.
Exactly, and the ironic thing too is that since Europeans came over and settled in America, like our main purpose was to try to civilize, you know, the savage Native Americans and try to civilize the other immigrant groups that are coming over, and yet the leaders of our country are acting just worse, really, you know, than they're not practicing what they're preaching in a lot of respects. So yeah, absolutely, that's a very good point. Good point. Anything else? Okay, I'll just come around and take a quick look at your homework, and I'm gonna give you some time to work on our assignment for Monday, and you probably can finish this, and that way you won't have any work over the weekend. Next week, on Monday, we'll discuss section 4, and then this chapter has 5 sections, so Tuesday, we'll talk about the last section. Wednesday, I'll give you your study guide, and then we'll take the rest of the days then to work on that and answer questions and review things. Okay? All right. Yeah, sure. Yes. This last one's really right. Yeah, they talk about they ask for you to point out details that make the passages more influencing. And obviously with the meatpacking one, giving those very specific, horrific details about what's going into the meat, that does it. I mean, that would make anyone cringe. And as Marie wrote, I'm glad I'm a vegetarian after reading that. So. Okay, so the rest of the credits you can work on this assignment. If you have something else for another class that you'd like to work on, you're welcome to go to your locker and get whatever you need.